We do have Mr. Charles Denny as our guest this evening, and Lynn Hodge, his nephew, is going to go ahead and introduce him and our program.
Thank you, Lily. It's an honor and a privilege for me to introduce your guest speaker. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Lily. Oh, what would you like to call it, Uncle Charles?
Associate.
Associate, okay. All right, a young associate.
Talking about customs.
Customs, okay.
Local customs.
Okay, all right, we'll do that.
Maybe better than 90 years ago.
All right.
Everybody here okay?
That's good. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Uncle Charles's family. Larry, Denny, if you would stand up, your wife Judy, and she's got her sister with her from New York, I believe it is. Glad to have y'all. Uncle Charles and my mother were brother and sisters. He was asked about George Holly and Margaret, right there they are.
They're out there.
Yeah.
I think they ought to be here.
My mother and Uncle Charles, brother and sister, and there were five of us siblings. My mother was the oldest. Uncle Stanley was next to my mother. Uncle Charles was next, and he's my buddy as well. Did I turn it off? And Clarence, and then Rachel. And Dean Denny's here. Rachel was, am I doing that? I guess I am. Rachel was Dean's father, and Dean and his wife and children, grandchildren, I think, are here. So, but we're here because my granddaddy, we called him Papa Denny, and Charles also called him Papa, so he was a Papa to all of us. Uncle Charles and his siblings grew up in the building business, and so Uncle Charles is here to tell us about growing up on Boones Creek. And
Well, pardon me there. I butt in to say a word or two. I thought I was just going to be engaged in a little discussion. But with this car, this crowd, and these nice meals, and the accompaniment here, and the decor of this wonderful audience, I think I'm going to run for office. I don't think I'll make a living by public speaking.
I think you'd be good at it.
Oh, no. Lynn did confront me the other day and said he wondered if we were talking about the meals, and I could imagine that none of you people would possibly know what it was like. A little better than 98 years ago, I was born, I guess, less than 1,000 yards down the road here next to the Cracker Barrel, in a house across the creek. And at that time, Boones Creek was a rather large creek. It came out of Jonesboro, of course, through here, and believe it or not, there was no bridges at that time, not even down there where the Cracker Barrel is. Where 26 interlocks there with the Boones Creek Road, the Denton intersection, that's where our home place was. That's where we lived, in a 7-room house right across the creek. No, I would, better than 98 years ago, I was born right here as a baby.
As a baby.
I was pride and joy. My only sister was a girl, my brother was a boy. And just to say a word or two, what this area of the country looked like better than 90 years ago. We had no bridges in here. I witnessed my first electric light in Boones Creek. I heard my first radio message in Boones Creek. A lot of first. I went to my first grade of school at Boones Creek. That was 1924, I believe. Somebody correct me on this. The old Boones Creek school out here, was it built in 1924? George Hawley ought to know.
Well, they built one.
The old Boones Creek School.
Which one is he talking about?
That was before my time, Uncle Charles.
The oldest one.
I love it.
I told somebody the other day, if I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself.
Well, let's talk about you were growing up in
Boones Creek Milling Company.
All right, my dad's first mill stood right down the road here, and the name of the mill, it was a 2- or 3-story brick mill, a rather large structure. I was about 6 years old at the time, and it was called the Boones Creek Milling Company. And it was in association with Abel Dyer, and I think Lee Carter, or W.F. Carter at the time. And when I was about 6 years of age, my mother had sent me from their home place there at Boones Creek, where we lived, right there at the Cracker Barrel, over to the mill and told me to go lie down and go to the office and go to sleep. Well, I followed their directions so far. When I got over to the mill, I couldn't read anything. So I saw the funny papers, so I just started looking at funny papers. And just in a few minutes, all of this black smoke began to fill through the doors, just filled up the whole perimeter of the building. I didn't know what was going on, and but I remembered as well as yesterday. And I was trying to find a way out, and I was groping around. By that time, the windows were so hot inside in the building, the glass was running down. My dad didn't know I was in the mill. He was on the 3rd story, I believe, instead of in. And my mother was taking care of Clarence, my brother. At that time was less than a year old. And she was sitting on the front porch, and she's the one that sent me over there. And when she looked and saw all the mill afire, she knew that I had gone over there. So I think they said she fainted. She couldn't tell my daddy that I was in the mill. And they came 2 or 3 times to try to get me out. But Mr. Carmack, our neighbor, told my father, he said he's come to the door 2 or 3 times, but he goes back in again. And said, they almost gave up on me. And miraculously, I found the opening some way back at the back of the door, went to the back, and you had to go down about 8 or 10 steps. I didn't take that, I jumped off there. I was about 6 years old. Ran up to the cornfield. Met Lynn Hodge. Or Lynn Carter. I don't think I could have met you at that time.
Have a drink.
But anyhow, I was there, and so I remember that fire. That was, I think, in 1924, and that was not the first mill that my dad had ever run. My dad was born in 1885. Excuse me. During 1885, and when he was about 17 years of age, old Mr. Kinchelow over next to Gray, about 5 miles out of Gray, we call it Gray Station because the train stopped there. At that time, there was only 3 families that lived in Gray. The Denny's, my dad ran the mill there. Big mill at that time. Lige Adams owned the mill. It was a nice mill, so they wanted my dad to run that mill, and he ran it. And so we lived there at Gray and ran that mill. And then it seems like that just every year or two we'd have to move from one place to another to keep up with our dad going from mill to mill. people would find out about him and wanted to do their milling. So he left the old Pinchot mill in the early days, even before he was married. And then he came to the Boones Creek Milling Company, I guess, and until it was burned down, and he built a little mill back to replace a little grist mill, and where he just crushed corn and made a little meal. And so then he left there to run other mills, the board mills in Johnson City. They wanted him. He ran that mill for a while. Brown Milling Company in Johnson City wanted him. Before they started the mill, he gave up on that because he didn't like an all-electric mill. He liked the water ground powered mill. And so, going from mill to mill, from Boones Creek to Gray, went to Washington, Telford. We had to live in Washington College, and he had to drive back to work at that mill. And he ran, let's see.
The Flowerville Mill.
The Flowerville Mill, that was a little city within itself in that time at Flowerville. On Saturday, we had about as much entertainment as you shake a stick at, big pitch and horseshoe, and all that sort of stuff. We had my dad's mill, and Mr. Tom Durham was he shoot horses. Old Gent Hale, that's Pat Cox's, Johnson City's brother-in-law. He had a big general store there, real close to the mill. And so on a Saturday afternoon, it was a place of activity. They pitched horseshoes, entertained themselves. They'd have a big, great drink for a nickel. And it was entertainment. That's the only way we could entertain ourselves. But they all had a good time. But I wanted to just make a remark about, I jumped from subject to subject. I apologize for that. I didn't come here ready to make any kind of a speech. I told Lynn I would like to tell him about my dad's mill, though. But bringing you up to date what Boones Creek looks like. Incidentally, this was the first church that I ever attended to. I came to Sunday school here years ago when I was 4 or 5 years old. We walked up here from down where we lived. My sister, his mother. And till my mother was a Methodist, so we moved. When we boys found out that we could drive the old Lexus car, she wanted to know if we could drive to Marvin. So we went to Marvin, and we stayed there for a number of years. But coming back again, right down here, when the old mill was here, the old Boones Creek Milling Company. Just picture this. There were no bridges in here at that time. Just before Boones Creek got down to that section, it divided right below the church and went around this way. And part of it fed the mill down there. The rest of it came by our house. And when they had a big torrential rain, I'll tell you, we had a creek and a half at Boones Creek. I have seen the time. I have actually seen the time in big, heavy torrential rains. That coops with chickens, even hogs, pigs, toys, everything coming down Boones Creek because it swept everything off the banks. They had no flood control back then or anything else. And so Boones Creek was large, and the only way that you could get across the creek down there at that intersection right there where it goes to Boones Creek and where the exit 26 stops, you had to go down in the creek with your car, drive along in the creek and up and out on the other side. That's the only way you get across. And I'm going to tell you one little incident. I always come back to this little story. We had relatives that lived in Morristown in Whitesburg. And at that time, I think we had a car was just coming in. Model Ts mostly, and half of them wouldn't run when they're supposed to. But just to give you an idea of how long it took us to go to Morristown to visit, to visit our relatives. We start right after daylight. so you wouldn't have to turn your lights on in the car. You could hardly see with them on. But anyhow, we would stop, and you had to go in the creek and out of the creek 4 times before you got to Jones Girl. And right up here at Margaret's Chapel, you drove in the creek for about 300 yards before you get out of it. And we would get down to Marshtown about 2:30 in the afternoon. That is, provided you didn't have to stop and repair a tire or two. And there's no one here that has any experience on having to fix it flat, especially when you had to get outside and when your sons have stolen the rubber stuff out to make gravel flippers with, and he didn't have anything to patch the tire with. That's when he went back to cussing again. So we got quicker with it many times. But it was exciting. We enjoyed it even that day, not knowing any better. But that was a time that before wage and hour law went in, I pay more now to get my hair cut than I used to make in 1 week when working at the largest wholesale house in East Tennessee, Alabama's called it. 40 hours. That's how it progressed along the way. So, Social Security, yes, it started about that time. You paid 1 penny on the first $3,000. It only cost you $30 a year, and that's it. But at that time, there was 28 people working for you, paying into the fund. Today, they tell me that there's hardly 2 people that's supporting you, your Social Security pay that you get today. And that's diminishing, it seems like, all the time. They've got to work on something to protect the future generations. Folks, I do want to apologize for ad-libbing and talking out there and off key.
Talk about, tell us a little bit about the Knob Creek Mill, which is the last mill that Papa Denny worked with.
Well, I hate to take anything away from George and Margaret Holly. They've been so wonderful. They were our neighbors, the Denny neighbors, when we moved to Knob Creek about 1934. My dad had just been united with B.G. Young to buy their properties over there at that mill, and it was a nice setup for us. They had a relatively new house, 8 or 10 rooms. Homer Sells that used to own it, and he got the place where his wife, the doctor said she needed to get away from the waterfall or something that was bothering her health. So I think that was a principal reason they wanted to sell it. But my dad and Glenn Young bought that mill. I was 34. I was about 16 years of age at the time. And I'm sure that Margaret wasn't hardly that old. But I remember when she first started to school over there, I believe it was up Oak Hill, somewhere in there. And she and Clarence started a little bit at a time. But
What all did they make at the Knob Creek Mill, and where did they sell most of it?
I beg your pardon.
I say, what all did they make at the Knob Creek Mill, and where did they sell most of it?
The Knob Creek Mill is a roller mill, a wheat roller mill that made flour and out of wheat, of course, and meal out of corn. At that time, don't forget, rural America, most of our customers that's coming to the mill is coming on horseback and wagons and that sort of stuff. And about 90% of the people around the area had wheat and they had corn. Why? They had to live. You didn't run to the store and buy a loaf of bread. There's not even sold. In the 20s, early 20s, I don't know anybody that sold bread out of the store back then. I remember the old Leonard store up at Boones. For years and years, old Mac Leonard, I think, was the founder of the place. And, but anyhow, people would come to the mill and bring their wheat. And my dad would buy their wheat and he'd test it first. A lot of you might not know what that means. He runs it, puts it in a tester and strikes the top and get a flat strike across the top. And if the tester comes to where it measures out 58 to 60 pounds per bushel, he would buy the wheat. He loved to buy it because he would give you 36 pounds of flour, 12 pounds of bran, if you know what that is, per each 60 pounds of wheat. And so you start unloading them out of the truck, unloading it, bring it into the mill, and you pour it there on the floor, and the elevators would take it up to about the second floor of the old Boones Creek mill and pour it out. And he'd store all the wheat, and when you got ready to go home, he'd give you a due bill, how much flour they would owe you, how much meal. And that was a flourishing habit at that time. You see, 90% of the people, they had large families, a lot of them around here, and they had to have their flour, and they had to bring the wheat to the mill, and they had small crops. So that was the activity, but it was a lucky thing for my dad. The old Boones Creek mill was called the Hobbs Mill. I don't know really how old the mill is. George Holly and Margaret might know. But it had new milling equipment in it. It was put in there just 2 or 3 years, or 3 or 4 years before my daddy came over, because he found out that Homer Sells had engaged with the W.J. Savage people out of Knoxville to put in a brand new flour milling facilities. That's new spelling, new sifters, and everything. And you ought to see the second story in the old Boones Creek mill. It's got your old sifter up there. Again, you know how wide it is. It's about 6 feet wide, about 8 feet long, I guess. And it does that like that. It's got a big balance wheel underneath of it. It's run. The whole mill is powered by water, or wheel. And that's the primary thing that kind of a mill needs. They have to have the water power to run the big wheel, and it has tremendous power when you transmit from a big water wheel that's got a race around it, all the way around with little cogs, mashing into cogs way down here, and when that big water wheel goes way around, it makes these little cogs go much faster, and they in turn, a shaft goes through, makes the one inside go much larger. So later on in years, the Boones Creek mill was, my dad bought a hammer mill that had never been heard of in the whole area. What is a hammer mill? No mill around could you take a big bag of corn with a shuck on it and just dump it into a hopper and it'd crush it up. But that's what the hammer mill does. And the land out fast is at 3,000 RPMs.
The Boones Creek mill was
That's
built
not that
by
fast.
Henry Basher. It's called the Basher Mill in the early days. The Basher Mill. Henry Basher.
Margaret is saying that the mill was called the Basher Mill at one time.
I understand it was.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure
There's
that
several names over the years. And I can remember when Papa Denny was running the mill that the Vines that lived on the far end of Boones Creek, up near the Jonesboro end, would bring their corn in there in a horse-drawn wagon, 2 mules pulling it. Mrs. Vines would always come with them, and a lot of times the ladies would come, the men to the mill, and the lady would come down to the house and sit with my mother, and she would entertain them while Papa Denny was grinding the cow feed or the cornmeal or swapping out flour. Now, a a lot of times they, I know Papa Denny talked about taking out toll. You know, that's when the farmers would bring in wheat, and like you said, they'd leave it at the mill, and he'd give them a due bill, and then they'd get, what, 36 pounds of flour and 12 pounds of bran for 50, 80,
You put it on the
60
books
pounds.
of you, Bill, and
Due bill.
you could take maybe 50 pounds of flour home with you, and then he had on the books that he owed you so much flour, and you come back and draw it from time to time.
Yeah, all year long, but the crop came in again next year. And
I'm just wondering if I should tell these folks here about this little thing that I told you once before that happened at Boones Creek Mill. And out of respect for his family, I won't tell you what his name was. I almost cry when I think about it. This guy lived on Boones Creek. And he came to Boones Creek and walked over Round Creek, the ridge. Denny knows all how that. He walked from there. He was a rather tall guy. And when he walked, he had a little satchel had on his shoulder, and it was made out of the old, kind of an overall material that my mother used to make my jeans and overalls, we call them, out of. And then you carry your books in it, called a book satchel. And he would put a little corn, about 10 pounds of corn in this left pocket on this, and about 10, 12 pounds on the other side. Put it around his neck, take his cane, and walk from Boones Creek here, over the Round Creek, over to Boones Creek Mill. Why? To swap that corn for meal. Why? Because they had to have meal at home for cornbread. So while he's at Boones Creek, George, Margaret, he would stop there and go down. You know what a wonderful spring we had there at the house. He'd go down there and get him a good drink, go back to the mill and sit down, rest a little bit, put the thing back on his neck, get his cane, and walk back to Boones Creek. How many of us will do that today? He did it from necessity. He had to have the meal. And my dad used to tell the story in World War II, not the Second War, the First War. A guy came into the Boones Tree Milling Company one time and told him, said, Bob, I don't have any money, but I've got to have some flour. And you can shoot me or do anything you want, but I'm gonna get me a bag of flour. So he just walked back there. My dad let him go ahead and buy it. I mean, get it. He never charged him for it, of course not. But that's the way it was. But if he got the money, he'd pay you for it. There's no question about it. I'm getting off the subject. You'll have to keep me straight.
You're doing fine.
I jump from one to another. I do
Well,
get carried away.
there's several-
Sometimes it takes me forever to get anything told. But I get sentimental. I'm at it when I even talk about it.
You've done a very good job, and I appreciate you coming and sharing with the folks here, and I'm sure they enjoyed listening to you talk about the mills in the county, and especially Boones Creek and Boones Creek, since they're such close communities, and how you and your dad, my granddad, was a part of it. We certainly appreciate that you sharing those times with us.
Well, I accept that and as a compliment, and I explain for not a more elaborate way to entertain you, but in speaking of customs and things back in those years, I do get carried away a little bit, thinking of what we have today compared to what we had then. But I'll tell you one thing, we were all happy people back then. We all survived. And we had wonderful communities. come home, it was not uncommon at all to see your mother and 8 or 10 of her friends, or lady friends, all of them sewing on a quilt, or making something for somebody else. And that was the usual customers here in Boones Creek. And I remember I listened to my first radio at Cleve Helms, place right above us, the Helms. And I'll say this, I know some of you have knowledge of Dr. J.R. Bowman, and John said he's dead now, he's deceased. His mother, Julia Bowman, used to run a dairy right above our house here on Boones Creek. Milked the cows, about 25 or 30 head of cow. And she'd come down to pasture mill every day, we'd let the cows out to get water down through the creek. And she lived right above us. And so we had the best neighbors in the world. My first radio that I ever heard was the Cleve Health Center. Only one person could listen to the radio at that time. Old WSM from Nashville. And we listened to the Grand Ole Opry even back then. But we graduated from that. And our first light on Boones Creek, I remember turning on the first electricity at Boones Creek. My daddy wasn't satisfied with just having one little light bulb. He had to have one with 2 light things in it with little red roses around it. And they'd have to make us go to bed because we just wanted to sit up and watch the lights. Sounds awful, doesn't it? But that's the first electricity we had on Boones Creek. And the first radio I heard was here on Boones Creek. First day I ever went to school was from Boones Creek. So I've got a lot to say about Boones Creek.
Then there's several that have questions.
Oh, okay. There's some that have some questions. Would you,
I'd be happy if I could hear you. Don't make them hard because I just went to the 3rd grade.
how many years did you spend in the 3rd grade?
If they want to come up.
I had to spend about 3 years. They said, this is the job. So my dad got out of the 4th. No.
Let's see.
I do remember my first grade at school, Boones Creek. I spent 12 years down there. And then we moved all over the country from time to time. I hardly knew where we was going to sleep at night.
Somebody's got a question for
How do you tell about the girl crossing the fence with Jonesboro's finest? She got caught in the
Larry's asking you to tell about the girl that, what?
Walking home from school, they had to cross the fence to get home, and she got hung up a little bit like that.
Must have been you and some girl was walking home from school one day, and the little girl got hung up in the fence. Do you think you ought to tell that?
He's talking about the time when all the young girls, well, not all the young, not all the girls,
Turn that one on.
90% of her underwear was made out of flower sacks and feed sacks. This is a true story. It was told to be true. Near Jonesboro. But I think the girls were Boones Creek. And he was telling the story. She was a very modest girl, and she wouldn't want you to know for $1 million that you could see anything just to see her, except her outer dress. But the misfortune was that when she crossed the barbed wire fence, she got hung up somewhere. Some of her undergarments flew over, the wind was blowing. And right across the seat of the seat of her panties, there was a picture of a big hog's head. And the caption under that, it said like this, Jonesboro's best. A lot of underwear was made out of the old feed sacks, and I'm sure it came from Boones Creek Medical.
Somebody's got a question back here.
Don't get over 110 years old, there's a limit to what I go.
I'm a great lover of mills, and I go looking for them, but are any of the mills that you're speaking about tonight, are there any remnants of them left to us to see?
The Knob Creek mill is still intact. I was in it not too long ago, and the flour milling part is still there. It looks like somebody may have attempted, it had 2 corn meal burrs in it. It looked like, I don't know where we had sold the mill to Dr. Tar, and he's 87 years old now, and I don't know where they tried to remove the corn meal burrs. I don't know for what reason, George. I don't know. Maybe you know more about that. George Margaret lives right up above the mill there.
He's going to try to redo them, but he never did get it done.
Okay, so are the burrs still in the mill now, or did they get?
They're still there.
Okay.
Both wheat and
George, you might tell us what the burrs are made out of. You know what they're made out of.
I never did see the wheat burr used.
Hard granite or marble, which one?
I don't know.
They're large. They have about 5 or 6 feet in diameter. These burrs, takes the corn poured down through the hole about that big in the top of the big burr, about this big, and the corn comes down, falls down in there. And these big burrs, that's about 6 feet across, they're corrugated on the bottom, grooves that cut to the center. All the grooves go to the center at a diagonal. And they're sharp, they're cut with knives, they're cut into granite, just like a tombstone. And that's what grinds the corn. Or the wheat, not wheat, you don't run wheat through there, just corn. And when that corn comes down through there, and those big granite burrs, there's one on the bottom that's stationary. The one on the top, you can calibrate it to make it move up or down the depth to the how it nests on the wheel, 1 inch or 2 inches above to fit the cavity where the corn comes in, and it goes in and goes on the bottom, and that's stationary, but the top comes down and lays on it just a little bit, and it goes around and around and around. That's what grinds the corn in the mill. And my dad was the first one on Knob Creek, George, to put in on meal. He had a double set to you, remember that? That you really got good cornmeal. A lot of people, when you get cornmeal, it had a lot of the husk in it, a lot of the cob maybe in it. But my dad would have that sifted out, and it was real cornmeal. He could sell cornmeal anywhere. I'm from the old Knob Creek. They had 3 patent rolls of flour over our family, and Mountain View and something else. But you remember those things, and some of the flower sites here I'm seeing from the old Boones Creek Medical. They're a rare thing today. I didn't know anybody had one. Well, anyhow, I'm surprised that we are having somebody in the audience that tickles me that's interested in one or 2 of the aspects of the meal. I wouldn't have thought that you would, because so many people don't have any knowledge at all what goes or what went into the old Knob Creek mill. It's really something to study, to tell you the truth about it. It has, when my dad took the operation of the mill guards, the fireman equipment was practically new. Homer Sale, he gave up on the flour making, they said. He couldn't, after that, and his wife, I think, couldn't be around water. But it has all the sister and all of the cleaning aspects and all that goes into the flour processing. And my dad, when you see him take this little slick thing out of his pocket, put a little flour on that, push it off to see if he's in a black space in it.
Yeah.
Test it, see how pretty it was. Well, anyhow, that's that part of that. But
I'd like to share something. I've been out of school 62 years, and I'll be 81 in December, but I want to share you with the grounds building company about the bow shacks. My mother was a good sewer, and my aunt was a good she knew how to sew. And so I guess it's either junior or senior year, I had this lady come up to me, which was my classmate, or maybe just a friend that was real close to me. And, you know, we just talked good and everything, but I didn't have any idea what she was going to tell me or ask me. She says, Mary, my mother said to tell you she'd pay any amount of money for you to get your skirt. Well, you know how you squirm a little bit, you didn't know what to say. You didn't know what to say, but I said, well, I got to tell it right, because my mother went down to Brownsville and she got the splash sacks. Well, you went to the, back then you had stores too to get your lace, your rich crack, what's it called? Rich crack. I'm not telling you right. And then all kind of things too, like the signs that you put on your skirt and your top. Back then, I love my slacks now, but back then you wore skirts and dresses. You didn't wear anything but that. So we wore the little skirts. But I did tell her, this is what I said. And I ran real nice to her. I said, go tell your mother to get her money and put in her pocketbook and go down to Brownsville and get her done. I didn't have any sacks to say, but go down and choose some of the flower sacks and make your dress, and then go to the grocery store, not grocery store, but the sewing store. But I have never forgot that. We've been out 62 years.
I had one of the last flour accounts, our Martin and I, where you used to get the 25-pound bag of flour. I never see one in the store anymore. They even cut the 5-pound down to 4, I think. Just like they did, you know, if you buy a pound of bacon, it's 12 ounces now, instead of 16. But the price stayed about the same. But we had the last flour count, and we get a 25-pound bag of flour. We haven't had a 25 bag of flour, how long, Mark? Years.
Another question.
Did the mills have flumes that carried water a long distance?
The lady asked me, did the mill have a flume? We called it the forebay that carried the water to the water wheel. And it was, I don't know how long it was, 200 or 300 feet long, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't remember how high it was, maybe 50.
Well, it had to be, the water wheel in itself was one of the larger water wheels, is about, I think in diameter, I know each bucket of water carries about 10 gallons of water. And when it fills up, and another one, and you talk about power, I'm not an engineer, but the engineer will tell you that you take a water wheel that's got, we call them buckets, it's about
4 feet
4 feet wide, and I said about 18 inches deep.
Yeah.
Per gallon, so how many
I
gallons?
don't remember how many gallons.
And when you've got a big head of water, say you've got 4 feet of water feeding that, when that water wheel begins to turn, it goes, and some more water, the pressure up here forces that water through there and hits those buckets. Every time it hits that opening in that water wheel, it sends that water wheel around, and that water wheel is running another auxiliary, a little wheels down at the bottom that's making mechanism inside the mill generate more RPMs, running the whole system of the whole process. So the water wheel, in essence, is the most important thing about a water ground. A lot of people love to come to the mill. They like water ground mill. My daddy refused to take a job at the Brown Milling Company, which is Joe Brown built the mill. Came to my dad, the first thing to see if he'd run it, my dad said, I don't like to run an all-electric mill. I like a water-powered stuff. I'm familiar with it. And if I never say anything else to people that's interested in this part of it, you talk about interesting dynamics. Go to the Boones Creek mill, go underneath and examine how the mechanism set up to generate power through wood cogs. The way you put stuff in the gear, the way you put something in the gear to make it operate, you got to pull a big pin out of a wall, let that collar slide down this wooden pole till it corrugates or fits into a motor wheel down here that has similar cogs that meshes with that, and then you put the pin back in to secure it, stand fast. Then you pull it down and put it in. There, you get traction wherever you want to divert what you're doing. Increase the momentum to get more, so you can grind. Got the power to do it. You couldn't do it with just straight power. So there's a lot of dynamics in the mill, and you can learn a lot, I'd say, by just examining. And then the ones, the old, as they said, Boones Creek mill. It goes back a long time. It goes back a long time.
Two more questions, very quickly. I visit mills all over the place, and two things I don't know is if the rivers run slow or dry on drought years, do the mills have to stop without water power? And then in the winter after harvest, when there's no more grain, do they stop producing in the wintertime?
I think I got most of that. She was asking if in the summer months, I guess, when you had a drought, what did you do for power? If
You did without mostly until it backed up enough to hold it. If you didn't have the facilities. My dad, at any time, he would grind at night because he didn't have the power to run the mill in the daytime because he didn't have the water. You had to save the water all day long. You got to get a big head of water backed up to where you had that water coming all the time. A little stream of water won't do it. That's what runs the water wheel. If the water wheel can't run at a consistent number of RPMs, you're not going to have any revolutions inside the mechanism that's going to operate correctly. So that's the essence of the whole thing. Is transferring RPMs from one place. Your grandfather, my dad, was the very best. I couldn't do it, and he only went to the 5th grade. But it took me 3 hours one time, and a guy told my dad, he said, Bob, if you don't hurry and figure this out. My team of horses is going to run off. I've got to go. I was trying to figure out how much flour and how much wheel to give him back, how much flour and bran to give him back on so many 100 pounds of wheat, based on the idea that 36 pounds of flour and 12 pounds of bran for each 60 pounds of meal. And I started figuring it, and after about 45 minutes to an hour, he said, told my dad, he said, listen, I'm in a hurry. He said, my team's not run away, I've got to get going. How long is it going to take it? And I was up in high school. This is no reflection to the teacher. I started figuring it out, trying to write 60 into this. And the man gave up and said, Bob, I'm in a hurry, my team's going to run away. Is it? Because you tell me, my dad would shut one eye and said, you get about 460 pounds of flour and about 180 pounds of bran. He said, that's good enough. I'll sit there. I'm still trying to figure out how my daddy does it. And you all can figure it out a little bit later when you get home. I told you later, say you take the wheat multiply by 2, and whatever you get, you multiply by 3. First with the flour, the second the bran. I'll leave it up to you. Don't sit up all night.
How did a boy court a girl back in those days?
You ought to be good at this one. He wants to know how a boy could court a girl back in those days.
How they good?
How they could. He's going to have to think about this. He'll come up with something. It might be time for you to tell one.
I don't know, are you a hack or a buddy?
I'm going to let you hold the mic too.
Oh, I'll never not tell that. How many kids under 16?
I don't see no kids here. Everybody's over 60.
Yeah, but I'm afraid of being prosecuted.
Tell him the statute of limitations is already run.
I think y'all go ahead and tell them.
I don't know, it's incriminating.
Then I could get where I can get the music.
Oh, me, I better let that stop. Rub that off, that historic, if I said anything like that when I first came through the door, rub that off. I'll have to ad lib on that later.
Tell them the one that you was telling me coming down the road.
Oh, my Lord, that's worse. Most everybody in here is understanding. Oh,
Oh, they ain't nobody in here that young.
Lynn, tell about these bedridden, about you know something.
you know, you have to be real careful when you go to the doctor. For some people. And I told this to a minister the other day. I owe him an apology because you shouldn't talk to ministers this way. But I told him that and he laughed, and so I figured it passed anyhow. So I was telling him this joke, and he thought it was a little laughter to it, so I laughed at it. The old lady was, I don't know. She's young if she's under 90, but talking to me. So, the doctor was asking her a lot of questions. Have you had this? And have you had that? And one of the questions was, he asked her, said, have you ever been bedridden? There it is. He said, have you ever been bedridden? She said bedridden, she said several times. Once in the budget. That's what you tell doctors.
That was good.
That's what jailhouse sure closed.
No, it's way down, Joe.
I'll never hear that word again. Think of that. George Boyd's got a question.
George Boyd.
George Boyd.
Tell us, George, tell us about the why when you moved from down at Whitesburg to Boones Creek, transported your blackberry juice and stuff up here, and tell us what happened to it.
He's saying when you came from Whitesburg up to Boones Creek and you brought your blackberry juice with you, tell them about how you transported that. Is that right? What happened when you was transporting the blackberry juice from Whitesburg to Boones Creek?
Oh, I really don't catch on to that, George. It must be the one I missed.
Well, that's what Stanley tells all about.
That was one of Stanley's jokes. That's Uncle Stanley's joke.
That's one of the Stanley's jokes.
That might be the one that the little boy told the school teacher that he said he and his daddy knew everything. And she said, he said, me and my daddy does. And she asked him a question. He said, that's the one my daddy knows. So that's what I'll have to tell you. That's the one down.
Anyway,
Good shot.
that was the wanna make some wine out of it, and they had fruit jars, and when they got transported, you know, with all the shaking and everything, well, that, night, they started popping the lids on them. And all of them popped off.
I've got mine turned off.
Pop the lids off.
I don't know anything about it.
That's what his brother Stanley used to tell all the time.
Well, I tell you what, we didn't have to pay to get in here, but we're gonna have to pay to get out.
If you've got a few more questions,
Anybody have any other questions? Ed Bone.
The Boones Station store had some kind of a mill attached to it. Do you know anything about that?
Ed is saying the Boones Station store at Boone had some sort of a mill, he thought, attached to it.
Oh, Mr. Ike Leonard. Mr. Ike Leonard.
I remember him.
The father of Dewey Leonard. And Gladys. Oh, Mr. Ike Leonard, before he had the grocery store, had a little mill up there. He crushed corn. He really did. He crushed corn. And he had a few customers. And then Dewey Leonard took over the store, and Gladys, his wife, they ran the store and it passed down. It's been in existence for a long, long time. And I remember when you used to go up there and get gasoline, the way you did, you went into Coalition of Energy, you wanted $2 worth of gasoline. You gave him the $2, he goes out, pumps you $2 up in the reservoir up here, $2 worth, hands you the hose. Stick it in your gas tank, by gravity it runs in your tank. When it's out, it's out. If you want more gas, go and give another $2. But anyhow, I have gone from Boones Creek store, our home right down here. I know Stanley, my brother and I, we had to go up and down journey. Our mother had us doing some journeying, and we stationed with that. And together, I think we had a dime. And he said, or I said, one, if you keep on churning so they won't miss their lick, and we missed not churning, keep that going, I'll go to the Boones Station and get us a box of Post Toasties. This is true. Clarence was here, I have to admit he's the one that did, I ate him. And then all the time in our life, as much as we like cornflakes, the only time in my life when I'd ran all the way to Boones Station and come back down here to Boones Creek where we lived, put the box down, get our big bowls out, put all the cornflakes in there. We couldn't wait to get started. We didn't have any milk. You know what we did? We ate the cornflakes with water. Put water on it. That's our delicacy back then. You get a big box of cornflakes. But Boones Station served a good purpose in Boones Creek. I'll tell you that right now, they did. And I'll tell you something else, don't never leave out. Old John Crouch's store up from Boones Creek Road a little bit. Don't never forget old John Crouch. He kept a store over there. I have to tell this little story, maybe it resonates with somebody, it's not funny, but 3 or 4 of us walking home from Boones Creek all the way over to Don Creek. Some of us, most of us follow along the way, coming out of school, going home. All of us together might have 12 cents. And we're going to stop at John Crouch's store and get some little cheese and crackers. hopefully, he wouldn't be in, that his wife would be there. Because she stayed in the store when he had to go to work. But she hated to see we boys stop there because she couldn't satisfy what we demanded. We told her we wanted 9 cents worth of cheese. She didn't know how much 9 cheeses were. So she put a thing out there to cut it off, and we tell her that's a little short. Mr. Crouch always gives us a little bit more than that. And she put it out there a little bit further, about twice what we normally got. That's wrong, isn't it? Well, anyhow, she cut it off. And when she said, now get out of this door and leave me alone, we said, well, now listen, he gave us some crackers to go with that. So she had to go get us some crackers. So we got the crackers and we got the cheese. One more story and I'm going to stop. Now, it was not a sin back in my day. I'm going to close that with this kind of a joke. Charles Bowman, the mortician that Johnson said he told him, he's a respectable person, but he loved the joke. Which it could be true or not, I don't know. But back then, they had to revert sometimes to stealing the chicken to get a little extra money. To buy what now? I don't know, like a stud smoking tobacco or something. But most generally, they'd steal a chicken and take it to a store, or the grocery store, and trade it, and they'd get 1 box of soda to throw the lady off key, and the rest of it would be candy and bubble gum and what have you. Well, here's the story. They were 2 of them doing that. One guy stole the storekeeper's own chicken. When he bought chickens, he put them down underneath. One of the boys goes around there and gets one of the hens, brings it through the back of the store, brings it up, and sells it to the merchant. And the merchant gives him 83 cents for it. Well, he goes out and tells his friend, he said, did he pay? He said, I got 83 cents. Well, he said, I'll take another one in there and see if I can get it. He had him to dump his chicken out, and this other guy went around and stole the same chicken. Bring the same chicken up to the front, and he asked the merchant, and they weighed that one up. And they gave him 2 cents more, or 3, than the other guy. And when the 2 got together, they said, you get your 83 cents, Don? Said, no, he didn't give me 83 cents. He said, what did he give you? He said, he gave me 81 cents. He said, well, he's a crook.